Chapter 82. A Righteousness unto Thee. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 10 to 13. When thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. In any case, thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment, and bless thee. And it shall be righteousness unto thee before the Lord thy God. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 10 to 13. This law is related to Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 6. The prohibition against taking as security or collateral on a loan anything that is essential to life. In this instance, on loans to the poor, whether business loans or charity loans, certain rules are established. First, the lender cannot determine the specific pledge or collateral to be given. He cannot go into the house to pick and choose what he wants as his collateral. This would humiliate the borrower. As long as an adequate security be given, the lender must be satisfied. This stipulation applies to any kind of loan, a charitable non-interest loan or a business loan at interest. Being a lender gives no man privileges over another. In those days, a man who loaned money often went to the borrower's house to pick and choose his collateral. This is still done in many places. Second, a common pledge was a man's outer tunic. This protected him against the cold or heat, and, with the very poor, it was commonly used as a sleeping blanket or cover. To demand this garment as a pledge against debt was to limit his ability to live. The best surety in debt is a man's character. This outer garment provided protection against both cold and rain. Money lenders not only took this garment in pledge, but they also used them in contempt of the owners. Amos tells us that such moneylenders, fathers and sons together, would go to a pagan fertility cult altar and use the garments taken in pledge as a pad to lie on while using a prostitute. Amos chapter 2, verses 6 to 8. This law sets down a premise which has had a major impact in Christendom. When, in colonial America, Judge James Otis decreed that a man's house is his castle, he had reference to this law. Intrusion into a man's house is a violation of his freedom. God's law protects a man from the malice and interference of powerful men. To protect men's houses and properties is to uphold God's order, because God has established the legitimate boundaries of the family's jurisdiction and freedom. A little thinking tells us what this law prevents when obeyed. When a moneylender can enter a house to choose his collateral, he can, with a practiced eye, inventory the contents of the house. It's then possible for him to urge the borrower to ask for more than he can repay. By this means, he can in time seize various valuable assets. For its own purposes, in various countries now, inventories of a man's house are required by the tax collector or by the Census Bureau. By this means, the state knows more than it has a legitimate right to know, and it can plan to use that knowledge lawlessly. To use Peter C. Craigy's excellent term, this law means that a man can borrow with honour. If a man is deserving of a loan, he is a man to be respected, not humiliated. Anthony Phillips commented, "The Israelites' attitude to their neighbours was a direct result of their understanding of the character of their God. Having received the grace of God, we must manifest grace towards other men. A letter written circa 625 BC makes it clear how common the practice of seizure at will of collateral by moneylenders was in antiquity. May my lord, the commander, hear the word of his servant. As for your servant was harvesting in Hasir-Assam, and your servant harvested, took measure, and arranged its storage according to custom before the Sabbath. When your servant had measured the harvest and stored it up according to custom, Awashai, son of Shobai, came and took the garments of your servant. When I had harvested this harvest of mine according to custom, he took the garments of your servant, and all of my brothers can testify for me, those who were with me in the heat of the sun. My brothers can testify for me. Truly, I am innocent of guilt. Return, please, the garment of mine. And if it is not for the commander to return the garment of your servant, show mercy to your servant, and do not drive him away. This letter vividly illustrates the helplessness of men under lawless rulers. This law was against the oppression of the poor. Where such oppression occurs, in time the circle of the oppressed grows to include the non-poor. If the immunity of any group in society from tyranny be breached, in time the tyranny will reach all. When the poor are oppressed, Exodus chapter 22 verse 27 says of them, that God says, "When he crieth unto me, I will hear, for I am gracious." God repeatedly declares himself to be the God of widows, orphans, and the helpless. Calvin held that gifts to God of funds received in violation of this law were not acceptable. For if we think to pay God by offering him this or that which we have spoiled from our neighbours, he will detest and abhor both us and our offering also. For why? God will not change his nature according unto our lust, and there is nothing more properly belonging unto him than kindness and goodness, for he is indeed the very fountain and root of it. And therefore, seeing it is so, must he not either transfigure himself or detest us when he shall see us cruel and wild beasts, so as every of us endeavoureth naught else but to devour the substance and goods of his brother? It is important to remember that, in word and in deed, Calvin was very mindful of the poor in society. Over the centuries, money lending has been a major form of oppression. There is no culture where the moneylender is not resented and hated. God's law, however, requires that mercy and charity be exercised in this sphere. Very plainly, the law does not expect either the borrower or the lender to be victimized. The purpose of the law is mercy and justice. Robert Jameson said of the outer garments cited in this text, "The ordinary size of them is 6 yards long and 5 or 6 feet broad, bearing a close resemblance to the plaid of the Highlander." At one time, both kilt and tunic served a common purpose. Verse 13 tells us 2 things in the latter half. First, if the lender is godly and honest, the borrower will bless him. This is a somewhat startling statement for us. What the law requires is that a moneylender, whether making a charitable loan to a fellow believer or a business loan to an unbelieving foreigner, be a godly and honest man. God does not expect the moneylender to lose money, but to be honest and just. The result will be a furthering of God's holy order, and the borrower will bless the helpful and honest moneylender. God does not want a conflict society, but a harmonious one. Then, second, to obey God in this respect, as in others, shall be righteousness unto thee before the Lord thy God. Verse 13. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 25, we are told, "And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before the Lord our God, as he hath commanded us." According to Sir George Adam Smith, this means that righteousness here does not mean goodness, uprightness, but rather justification, vindication, the right to live, and, by consequence, their life itself. In other words, life is a privilege, and we can live it only on God's terms, His law. The rabbis of old held that righteousness meant alms. This meaning also prevailed in medieval Europe and in the Reformation. The privilege of life is validated by our faithfulness to justice, mercy, and community.